What's the creepiest, most unexplained thing you've seen in broad daylight?
When I was a teenager, I was at a friend's house when his parents and family were not home. I was on his back porch tying my shoes, then I went back into his house. Tying my shoes, a 20-second action. No. I walk inside and his entire family is back home and they're sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner and they ask me what I am doing here? They're staring at me like I am crazy and asking why I just walked into their house. I ask for the time, they tell me it is 6:30 p.m. I lost an entire hour doing a 20-second action. To this day I still have no clue what happened or where the time went.
Crossing at a busy intersection and seeing my perfect double walk towards me. We basically eyes locked until we passed each other. A total mindef. Even more disturbing. Instead of stopping and chatting and being amused by the entire biological coincidence. My immediate subconscious reaction was a massive rising internal rage that someone somehow had stolen my face. Very, very weird.
Man, I would love to come across my doppelganger. Weird but neat.
A man with freshly exposed bone on his arm and missing a substantial amount of skin and muscle walked up to me in a parking lot asking me calmly for cigarettes. It really freaked me out, and told him I was calling 911 for him. He immediately ran off and I gave his description to 911. There wasn't much blood but the guy clearly needed immediate medical attention. This was in San Jose on an afternoon about 5 to 6 years ago. Still have that image giving me nightmares to this day.
There's a homeless guy that gets sent quite regularly to a hospital in Dallas. Dude has nothing other than bones from calves down. Just skeleton feet. What happened was when the freeze hit a year or so ago, frostbite started taking everything away. He won't let doctors remove them because the local kids pay him like $10 to see it. The smell is so bad the nurses and doctors, from a level 1 trauma center, will gag, puke, even cry because of how awful that stench is. Nothing comes close to describing it.
I used to live on a farm and one morning there was a full horse leg on our driveway. Like still had part of the hip attached and was fresh. We sprinted down to our horse paddock to find all our horses completely fine. We disposed of the leg and never got an explanation. Very creepy. Peas. This happened in Canberra, Australia, so there's no mountain lions or bears around here.
One of those huntsman spiders you got over there probably did it. While this can be explained, the image still creeps me out to this day. It was around the time of planking craze. I had no idea what it was and hadn't heard anything about it. Got a taxi into town and was walking around the city center and life was normal. I then take a turn into the town square and there was around 200 people planking everywhere on everything. I don't know what was going on. I thought there may have been gunshots or a bomb. Or maybe the world was ending. I then asked someone next to me and they explained it and we laughed it off, but for that brief moment of time I'll never forget that uneasy feeling.
The fact that the planking era and flashmob era overlapped is vastly underappreciated.
An older man watching me at a gas station and then literally following me for miles around town. Like if I turned into a parking lot and started driving another road, he still followed me. I got on a 4-lane road in the left lane and got beside someone, then sped up and merged while taking an exit, so the guy was blocked by the pickup truck in the right lane. That's probably the scariest thing I've ever had happen in broad daylight.
You did exactly right. If it ever happens and you can't shake them, call the police and let them know you're being tailed. They'll either have you pull into a parking lot with a cop already there, or drive right to the police station.
In college I lived on the 11th floor in an apartment with no balcony and it was about 4:30 in the afternoon. I watched a man walk into my apartment about 10 seconds before I walked in, and habitually bolted the door behind me. It locked automatically on the outside. I was living with 3 roommates at the time, so I just figured they were having guests over, no biggie. I put my stuff on the couch and went towards the back bedroom to say hi to whoever came over. My roommates had no idea what I was talking about. It wasn't a big apartment, but I searched everywhere. My roommates stayed in the back bedroom sufficiently freaked out. There was no one else in the apartment and the door was still bolted from the inside.
Me, my 2 brothers and our uncle were running down the lake in his boat on a beautiful summer's day. Blue sky as far as the eye can see. Until we looked towards the north shoreline, and saw a smallish passenger jet flying low. Until it went below the tree line and disappeared. We were flabbergasted, because our family has been in the area for over 100 years and there is not an airstrip in that direction, anywhere. There was no loud bang. No fireball, nothing. No way it had crashed. We still don't know how it was possible that it did what it did.
Creepy but explainable. My dad is a paramedic, and one call took him to an SUV that had driven into the river and was being towed out. The car was obviously not working and the two guys inside had already passed away. As they're pulling the dead guys out of the car, suddenly all the lights flash on, the windshield wipers start going on full speed, and the car starts blaring the radio at max volume. Freaked everyone right out.
My grandpa was a Mountie in Canada, mounted police, and he came across a car that had just crashed and been almost completely submerged in a lake. He rushed over and reached into the open window to see if somebody was inside, and his hand squished into a mass of warm squishy guts. Turns out the person was carrying giant containers of cottage cheese that had spilled, and the driver had left a few minutes prior. He couldn't eat cottage cheese for the next 60 years of his life.
I'm not sure why this came to mind, but I still haven't been able to figure it out. Shortly after I'd started a new job, I accidentally jumped the wrong bus home. It was the same line as my usual bus, but it ran an adjunct route that dropped me a mile or two from where I needed to be. It was a Sims Pons moment. The bus driver turned around and told me, "This is the end of the line, you have to get off." I began my trek to the Park N ride and took my liberties cutting through various vacant and business lots. One such lot was a construction supply yard, full of cement forms and heavy equipment. I definitely didn't belong there, so I was feeling a bit on edge as I crept through. I saw something out of the corner of my eye that startled me so badly that I yelped. It was an animal roughly the size of a small dog with long ears like a rabbit, but it was standing on its hind legs, and when it saw me, it took off, jumping the way something like a kangaroo would, bounding large distances with just its hind legs and its front legs tucked in. It was fast and it disappeared so quickly that it made the moment all the more surreal. I think some of us know the feeling. It was like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to have seen. I wrote it off as being some kind of very large jackrabbit at the time, but when I got home and did a little research, jackrabbits don't move that way, nor are there any species that even remotely resemble that in my area, northern United States. Maybe it was some kind of escaped exotic animal. It creeped me out and helped me cover the long walk back to my car that much more quickly.
It was 1984. I was 15 years old and was alone at my older sister's house. It was late morning. I had just got out of the shower, still wrapped in a towel when I heard a noise outside. I looked out a window and watched a complete stranger tying the doorknob of the main entrance to the railing of the deck with a rope I used to walk the dog with. He then leaned a mop, that was on the deck, against the door. I called my sister, told her what happened, got dressed, got the heck out of the house through a different door and hid in the bushes until police arrived. The house was somewhat remote with no close neighbors. Found out later the door he tied up was unlocked. No clue how long he had been lurking around before I knew of his presence. To this day we have no idea who that was and what his motives were. Beyond creepy, definitely unexplained.
I once came home to a very similar thing. My door was tied to my deck with a rope and the door barricaded with something or other I can't recall. It was bizarre. As it turns out, my dog had managed to open my gate and door. I was just down the street and live in a rural area, so don't always lock things. The mailman saw my dog, recognized him, and brought him home, but the dog just reopened the door and ran back out. So, the mailman tied the door shut and barricaded it. So anyway, something weird and bizarre was actually a heroic act by the local mailman.
Not really creepy, but I was walking down the street on my way to the store when a large dog jumped through a glass window from a second story of a house and landed on the front lawn. I tried knocking on the door and got no answer from them or any of their neighbors, so I called animal control and stayed with the dog, who other than a few scratches was okay. Once they arrived, they called the police to investigate because even the animal control lady had no clue what would cause a dog to do that. Edit. The dog did not knock on the door.
When I was a kid, there was a field near my house in rural Florida that glowed rainbow colors. The grass had different shades of color, all day long. That field got bought up and bulldozed decades ago for a farm, however.
This is the weirdest thing I've read on this post. Rainbow as in shimmering, like you see a rainbow pattern in an oil spill, puddle of oil?
Not shimmering, but the grass had all the hues of a rainbow. Likely refracted from somewhere, but to a little kid it looked like magic. Me and my sister called it Rainbow Hill and went out there to play in the summer.
My family had the car packed up for a road trip because we were moving across the country from the PNW to the Rust Belt. We were heading to the highway to get out of town and had to take some weird access road to get there. On the way, there was some man holding a long barrel rifle to a woman's head, walking through a vegetable garden. He was holding it with one hand, and had a cigarette in his mouth. The woman was crying. My mom didn't believe me. I was 14, I know what I saw.
I'm sorry your family didn't believe you. That adds an extra layer of effort up in trying to process what you saw. Similar frustration with my family not believing me when I was 13. It was past sunset but still light enough to see outside. I went to our backyard to get something when I looked past our yard to the street over, and heard a loud scream and saw a young woman running away in a panic yelling, "Help! He's going to get me," and a man chasing after her. It happened so quick but I clearly remember her panicked voice. I came inside shaking, telling my family what just happened, and they all dismissed it saying I didn't know what I really saw. Someone even said it was probably some girl playing around with her boyfriend. I know that's not what happened, and I really wish both these situations weren't real.
I once saw a dog walk on two legs across a street. Scared the piss out of me.
Back legs or front legs?
On a trip to Gulf Shores, Alabama. Stopped to gas up at some rundown gas station that was also a truck stop in Mississippi. Went to the bathroom, and as I'm standing at the urinal I had the strangest feeling that something was off. This strange feeling overwhelmed the entire left side of my body. I don't claim to be supernatural or have any weird feelings, premonitions, and I have never experienced that feeling before that day or since. Anyways, I get up on my tippy toes to look to my left where the stalls were located. There was this deranged-looking white guy with nasty, greasy-ass hair and a fed-up scowl on his face staring directly at me. The most typical-looking psycho killer you could imagine. He had to have been standing on the toilet because I could see his whole face and the upper part of his shoulders. Immediately zipped up and got the F out of Dodge. Didn't even wash my hands.
I've always been told that what you experienced is your unconscious brain noticing something your conscious mind glossed over. Part of your instinctual fight or flight system or something.
My dad, brother, and I went to a movie theater one day in Florida. Was around 4-ish, so it was getting darker but still light out. We went up to the front where you buy tickets, and when we looked around there was absolutely no one in the movie theater at all. No employees, no other guests. We simply walked in, looking all around to try to find anyone we could to purchase a movie ticket, but could find no one else. All the movies in each of the theaters we checked were running but with no one else inside. So we just sat down and watched a movie, then left without seeing anyone else the whole time. It was very surreal.
Greater than I had a similar experience. My ex-partner and I went to a small local cinema to see one of the early Paranormal Activity movies. Late night session. We paid at the concession stand and went in. We were the only two people in the theater for the movie. Once the film ended and we were sufficiently spooked, we noticed that the lights didn't come back on in the room. We explored the rest of the building and couldn't find a single person, customer or staff. We walked down to the main doors, which we found closed. We were able to get out using a push-bar exit door. We got outside and there was not a single person on the street. We made it back home without crossing paths with a single person. Was very eerie.
My high school girlfriend and her family all talked about the ghost in their house and always said that it sounded like a man wearing boots walking down the hallway. We were all very close, and one day when they weren't home I just walked in and went to my GF's room and laid on her bed while I waited for them to get back. A man in boots walked slowly right down the hall and right past the door to GF's room where I was laying. I did the next logical thing and just climbed out of her bedroom window. They showed up a few minutes later and asked why I was just standing around in the front yard and why I hadn't just gone in. I told them that I heard the ghost and climbed out of the window to escape. They laughed their freaking heads off. Broad daylight, totally creepy and very unexplained.
It would have been funny if this was an elaborate prank they pulled on you.
This is my dad's story, not mine. In the 80s, my dad was in the Peace Corps and lived in Sierra Leone for 3 years. He had a motorcycle, or some sort of motorbike at least at one point, and would ride around the roads when he had free time. One day he's riding a dirt road that snakes around a small mountainside or hillside past some construction works. About half a mile after the roadwork, he sees a man on the side of this dirt road on the mountain, hillside just laughing his butt off. And he was blue. Not like painted blue, but asterisk blue. At first my dad rode on, thinking nothing of it. And then it sunk in. That he saw a blue dude sitting on the side of a dirt road laughing wildly. He turned around and rode back to where he saw the blue dude and there was nothing there. He kept retracing his path beyond the roadwork and never saw the blue guy again. Later that day he went back to the village he was living in at the time and told the locals about what he had seen. The locals all laughed and said, essentially, no you didn't. White men can't see devils. Edit. Beyond the color of his skin, what made this even more spooky to my dad was the way the guy just completely disappeared when he backtracked. There was nowhere for him to go off the road, due to it being on a hillside, and he never found him again on the road, making it seem as if the blue man simply vanished off the face of the earth. Edit 2. Talked to my dad more about this one this afternoon. He said the color of his skin was, like, bright blue, like unnaturally blue, bright blue. He also said he could hear the voice of the guy in his head like he was talking directly into my dad's mind, telepathy style.
Hey man, Tobias Funker needs a break sometimes.
When I was about 8, my parents, my brother and me were hiking somewhere in Austria when we came across the ruins of a medieval castle on a hilltop. A sign said that there was a cafe near the ruins, so we went up. The cafe was deserted, all the tables and chairs were toppled, and next to the building stood a brand new big Mercedes with a lot of bullet holes in the trunk and the rear window. The car was heavily armored, the rear window was so thick that the bullets hadn't even penetrated it. We turned around on the spot and got out of there as fast as we could. Back in the hotel, my dad reported to the police but they dismissed it. Never knew what came of it. Edit. Since so many commenters suggested it was a movie set, that could very well be an explanation, but still it was scary and we didn't want to stick around to maybe find out the hard way that it was not a movie set after all. Also, why wasn't anything cordoned off, and why wasn't anybody around? Concerning the police dismissing it, when my dad called them, they said they were going to investigate. The next day he called again to ask what came from it, but they said it was nothing, the holes in the car had been caused by children throwing rocks. Unless those children were able to throw very small rocks at very high speed, that was obviously BS, but we got the message that they didn't want to tell us and we weren't supposed to keep asking.
The part about the abandoned cafe and bullet holes in the car made me think of the Goonies.
I guess this sort of fits. Used to be an outside claims adjuster in my 20s and had a particularly putty territory in a major city. One day I was walking to a shop to write an estimate and noticed a condom filled with poop on the sidewalk. Stared at it for a minute or so, thinking about the decisions I had made in my life that led to that point. Between the poop condom and the job overall taking its toll on me mentally, I started looking for a new career when I got home that night.
One time me and my mate were walking to our bus and we both look ahead to see a big centipede crawling on a girl's head just for it to disappear when it got on the front of her face. Me and my mate told her, but she always swears up and down it never happened.
She sucked it into her mouth and ate it, then tried to make you think you never saw anything because she doesn't want anyone to know.
She's hiding something, thinking face.
I was walking past a church one day when I was about 15 and standing in front of one of the graves was a cowboy dressed head to toe in pure white. He looked straight out of a movie. His hat, shirt, waistcoat, trousers and boots were also white, like an incredibly clean white as if he'd only just put him on. He was white, had short brown hair, stubble and was an average-looking guy. I kept staring at him, blinked and then he was just effing gone. I live in the UK so it was weird to see anyone resembling a cowboy anyway. I don't know if it was my mind playing tricks on me but I could swear he was there. He looked so real.
Ah, my old friend, Arthur Morgan. I believe there is a name for this phenomena, but I would never know how to go about Googling such a thing. But this was around 2013 or so, and I was having a smoke in front of my apartment on the front steps in the middle of the day, around noon or so. I got up to head back, and just for a few fleeting seconds while looking at the building, it looked totally unfamiliar. I knew I lived there, I knew it was my home, I knew I had just stepped outside only 5 minutes previously, but my brain was giving me some kind of indication that I had never seen this place before and that there was danger inherent. I just kinda violently wagged my head back and forth, like an aggressive, no, gesture, and was immediately back to normal. But I'll never forget that moment. It was like my concept of reality had very momentarily just cracked.
Sounds are like jamais vu, when something familiar becomes strangely unfamiliar.
Till. Folded hands.
I saw a zombie. Naked man, ashy dirty skin, eyes rolled up in his head, stiff limbs sort of lurching through traffic in Jamaica. I was working in Kingston, Jamaica at the time in the late 80s. I asked my Jamaican crew and they said yes, it was a zombie, but it is not magic. They said people do this to people for revenge. A few weeks later I saw another one. An old woman this time.
Holy FLMAO, my family is from Kingston and when I visited in 2018, we literally saw someone in traffic exactly how you described. My sister said something to the effect of, he looks like he should be in The Walking Dead, and my dad just laughed because that was apparently not that abnormal.
Wow. I never met anyone else who had seen one.
Maybe not creepy, but unexplained and just weird. A woman doing Tai Chi on the hood of a car in a gas station parking lot in rural Louisiana.
That's the best way to do Tai Chi in Louisiana. By yourself.
I was walking with a friend of mine in the city in broad daylight. A man was walking in 10°C fully naked with his wang fluttering into the wind. This shocked both of us so much our brains restarted and it took us 20 seconds to actually process what we saw.
Well, I am from Frankfurt and we have a well-known nudist here, Der Nackte Jorg, the Naked Jorg. You can often see him jogging or riding his bike. At first I thought, holy moly, his worst shin is out for everybody to see, but now I admire him. He lives the dream, totally free. What a legend. Edit. Wow, this comment blew up. Guess I have something to show him next time we meet. Thanks for all the comments, cheers. Edit 2. Today I learned Jorg was featured for almost a decade in the Frankfurter Tourist Guide and even made it onto the Wikipedia page of Frankfurt Sockenhausen, which states the following. Ein zeitgenössisches Sockenhauser Original ist der Nackte Jorg, ein Nudist. Der Mann trägt, abgesehen von leichtem Schwerk, niemals Kleidung. Seine Identität und seine Beweggründe sind Gegenstand zahlreicher Legenden. A contemporary Sockenhauser original is the Naked Jorg, a nudist. He wears nothing besides light shoes, never clothes. His identity and reasons are subject of many legends.
I once had a dream I was walking solo down a familiar dirt path towards a wooded area. Side note, the path felt familiar to me in the dream. I had never been down this path before. As I walked toward the wooded area, the feeling of familiarity changed and the path ended at an old abandoned cemetery under the tree canopy. The familiarity suggested the path continued and the cemetery should not be there. I was drawn into the cemetery toward a specific grave. The detail was vivid. There was an old stone bench next to a sunken grave. The headstone had an angel on top. The remaining wing had a pine needle dangling off, hanging from a cobweb, drifting in the breeze. It was peaceful and quiet. I immediately woke up and felt like the dream was calling me back. I felt oddly connected. The jolt from waking up was so startling I decided to write the dream down. Fast forward a couple of years. I was considering buying a house with my girlfriend. After we reached a house we were considering, the realtor called and said she was running late. While waiting, we walked the outside of the house. Behind the house, we noticed a path past the overgrown grass going into some woods. To kill time, we decided to walk the path to the trees. While walking along and enjoying the sun on my face, I was hit with an intense feeling of déjà vu. I knew this place. As we reached the woods, there it was, the abandoned cemetery. It was the same cemetery in my dream. I told my girlfriend I'd visited this place in a dream and described specific details down to the pine needle. She thought I was trying to pull a stupid prank until she saw the sunken grave, missing wing and stone bench, and even the pine needle hanging off the angel's wing. She immediately walked back toward our car. The entire experience was a copy-paste of my dream with the exception of my girlfriend being present. Later that day, we were back at my house. She asked me how I knew all that detail. I let her read the dream I wrote down. I described the path, trees, cemetery and weather perfectly. She refused to ever talk about the experience again. That was around 20 years ago. The experience still haunts me to this day.
I was driving down I-4 from Tampa to Disney and I saw someone walking in broad daylight pushing a baby stroller, which was super odd. As we approached I realized said person was wearing one of those spandex pink onesies. As I got even closer the person was pushing a 50s style carriage with a mannequin painted black in it.
Back on January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded. My family was watching the live launch coverage as it happened. At the same time, we heard a loud sound from my room. We went to see what the sound was, and a poster of a space shuttle we had fell off the wall.
I was maybe 14 to 15 years old, and I would frequently sleep on the couch in our living room. We lived in a typical suburban colonial where the couch faced the front door. Since I could remember, we never locked our doors, as we lived in a pretty decent city. I remember one night I was still awake at 3 to 4 a.m. listening to music, when I saw a car quickly pull up our driveway. I then saw a very skinny, tall man open our front door, stand in the hallway for 20 to 30 seconds facing my direction, then leave the house and drive away quickly. I remember telling my parents and entire family this in the morning, and they did not believe me. My dad insisted it was him, as he'd leave for work in the early hours of the morning. I know I was young, but I also know that was not my dad, as my dad was stockier and shorter than this man. It freaks me out to this day to think what this man was going to do.
To be honest, the first thing that story brings to mind is someone in the suburb pulling in exhausted, walking up, opening the door, then being confused by the layout before realizing in horror they have just walked into someone else's house and running away panicked.
A car off of the road, on its roof on the other side of a farm fence. When I got down to it, all the windows were smashed and blood was everywhere. 5 minutes later, this guy dressed in a suit and tie comes walking out of the trees that the car is in front of, claiming it was his car. Not a scratch on him or anything. Edit. As apparently I have made too many comments, I have figured out how to put them all together. I apologize for my noobishness, cheeky smiley face. Answer to questions. So, the police arrived and spoke to the gentleman. As it turned out, the vehicle had actually belonged to his son, who had been driving at excessive speeds, hit the gravel shoulder and went for a tour. The blood was from the son being bombarded with all the broken glass. Apparently they had crawled from the car and called their father. They were taken home, not to the hospital, and dad came back to try and deal with the car. Son was fined for leaving the scene of an accident and other minor things. Father fought the charges but lost. The fact that he strolled out of the trees towards this mangled sunfire was the creepy part. Well, that and coming up to an upside-down car with blood everywhere.
Given there was visual evidence at the end, I think this might count. Okay, and this was the only ever unexplainable bad thing I've encountered. I'd been working as the visitor services manager at the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center for 3 years. My office was on the main floor of a circa 1,872 carriage house. I mostly sat at the front desk, gift shop space around me, mini gallery behind me. This particular day it was a miserable rainy, sleeting March Tuesday. We'd had no guests come through the visitor center or tour the house. A bit before 5 p.m. I sent the 2 guides to close the Stowe house. Window shades need to be closed, some doors opened, some doors closed, etc. I'm now alone in the carriage house. That's pretty normal. I was alone always when the museum was closed to the public. What was not *normal was the sudden stomping feet I heard just above me in the guide break room. Someone big was stomping around and moving things. Heavy things. Stomp, 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 thump. Stomp, 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 thump. We'd been broken into a month earlier. Someone had come in and taken the cash from the donation box and the cash register while I'd been across the lawn at a meeting. So I immediately thought the same was happening again. But that didn't make sense. I could see the main staircase from my desk, and the door to the other one was always locked. But the noise was continuing. Finally I called up to the guide break room where the noise was coming from. The room should have been empty. It was a 2-way phone set to speaker. I could suddenly hear the stomping and movement much more clearly. There was someone up there. They sounded angry or upset. Stomping and heaving things. And then it came up to the desk. I could hear it panting. Moving papers. Frantic. I radioed security. Our security guard wasn't far away and marched up to the break room by the front stairs while I watched the back stairs. No one was up there and no one came down. Except Rod, our security guard. He's found nothing. We had motion detectors. Had someone hidden, they would have been caught. I know what I heard. I'll never forget hearing it through phone speaker as it approached the desk above me. Hear it breathe. No, it was not good. Not safe. Bad. Something very bad. My two guides returned shortly thereafter, and on the break room table was a big crumbled pile of plain white printer paper. The guides swore up and down that the table had been clear when they'd left to close the Stowe house. I should add these two guides were people I'd worked with for several years. Both older gals, and civil with each other but not great friends. I am certain they had nothing to do with this. I've bumped into things a couple times, always it was a curious experience. This wasn't. This scared me more than I think anything else has. It was evil. I went home shaken and sat in the Stop and Shop parking lot until my husband finished work that night. I was too scared to go home alone. Edit: if anyone wants to hear a couple more crazy stories from this place, let me know. It was weirdly haunted. Haven't really encountered ghosts before or since. And #X200B. Update: okay. A few other things I experienced there. So again, the museum was closed to the public on Mondays, which meant I was along in the visitor center those days. One evening our security guard came in to stand inside the building while I closed out. Boring, typical protocol. I nipped up the back staircase to the single toilet to pee. As I was washing my hands, I heard a male voice call my name several times. It was said with distinct urgency. It didn't sound like Rod, our security guard. I rushed down the stairs, but it was just Rod, looking a bit baffled by how panicked I was. And #X200B. The Stowe Center has multiple buildings which exist on a campus known as Nook Farm. Mark Twain's house backs against the Stowe lawn. The most impressive structure is the Catherine Seymour Day House, a brick Victorian that would put Disney's Haunted Mansion to shame. The SC's administrative offices occupy the second and third floors of the Day House. The fourth floor is terror incarnate. One evening I entered the Day House to help with a public program. I was in the back second floor alone, the OG servants' quarters, when I heard giggles behind me. My first instinct wasn't fear, it was amusement. I thought maybe some of my co-workers were teasing me. We didn't really have a culture of that, but at 24 I was so for maybe that place being fun for once. I turned a tight corner into the darkest wing of the old servants' quarters, following the laughter. It was several voices, several women. I got down to the end of the hallway and my brain kicked in. None of the office lights were on. The room I was about to walk into was pitch black. I made a hasty retreat. Edit 2: the other story is further down. Too many words for a single post.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day. So be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.